For the skills lab today, we're going to be doing emotional regulation, checking the facts, and I'm here with a group of 3 college-age females who I'm going to be working with on this skill. Okay, hi guys. So today we're going to be talking about emotional regulation and checking the facts. So we're going to start off just by saying, what is a fact? Does anyone know what a fact is? I think, it's kind of like a weird question because we all know, the word fact. We grow up thinking that we just know what that means, but really, facts are things that we would observe with our 5 senses, and we can verify them through statements or feelings or needs or wants. So if you say, I see the moon, that's a fact because you can verify that with your senses. If other people look, they'll also see the moon. We can also observe behavior of other people with our senses. So I can say to Tzipora, I heard that you want to go out tonight, or I saw that you took the last piece of cake. And those things are things that I would observe through my own senses, but those things might not necessarily be factual, depending on how I phrase them. So we're just going to skip through this sheet a little bit, and we're going to talk more about what facts are. But basically, my main point in defining what facts are from the beginning are that much of what we believe to be factual are actually just an interpretation of facts. And we, as human beings, interpret things to make sense and give meaning to our life. And interpretations are really things that we tell ourselves in order to make sense of what's going on in the world. So by having a healthy interpretation and understanding things and with our senses and giving it our own personal meaning, we're going to be giving our life, a greater enrichment and greater meaning. But there's a challenge with that because we often, and we'll go through some examples together, we often overinterpret or misinterpret facts in our lives, and usually with a negative bias, not a positive bias. So I'm sure you all can think of an example. Let's say I was expecting you guys to come over here for dinner, and you guys show up after dinner ends. And I might jump to the conclusion right away and say, you guys don't love me, you don't want to hang out with me, you hate me. That is an overinterpretation right away with a negative bias, and that's something that's going to cause me to feel really upset, and it's going to cause problems in relationships that I have in my life. We always, as humans, have an urge to give meaning to things going on. So if we look outside and we notice red and orange and yellow in the sky, we're gonna say right away, that is a sunset. But the second that I see you taking something from my kitchen, a piece of a cookie, I might, right away, my mind is gonna jump to how does that relate to me? So it could be a good judgment. Oh, that's good because now I'm not going to eat the cake and I didn't like it anyway. Or it's bad because you took it away from me. So basically, I'm just trying to show how everything that happens in our lives is an interpretation of what we feel and how it applies to us. So there's different things that might lead us to interpret facts differently. So one of them is our emotions. If we're afraid and someone comes up to us and says something, we might interpret that as them saying it in an aggressive way. If we're very fearful and a homeless man comes up to us in the street, we might start freaking out and interpret that as an attack on us because we can fill the gaps in what's going on with our worst case scenarios if we let our emotions get a hold of us. The next thing that will alter our interpretation of facts are our beliefs that we have from the beginning. If we altogether grow up believing that people are not trustworthy and we're scared of people, then every time that we meet someone, it's going to be that lens. So if we have a boyfriend who would be coming home late from work, right away, we don't trust people. Our interpretation of that, it's a fact he's having an affair, or it's a fact he was out with his other friends and he hates me. So we need to understand what those core beliefs are and how our emotions are impacting what we see. The next one is values. If you value what people think, then that's going to be the lens through which you want to act and through which you see things. So if you value your neighbor's opinions, if your house is a mess, you're right away going to think the neighbors are going to think I'm lazy or they're going to think I'm a mess. Similar to that is life experiences. If we grew up in a certain family where it's not acceptable to express your emotions, then when you cry right away, you tell yourself that means that you're weak because you grew up with that. And same thing, it's kind of connected to unspoken rules that you grow up with. That also can alter the way you interpret facts. If you judge everything that you're given based on an unspoken rule that you've had, let's say you think that you judge every job that you get on a salary that you expect yourself to get when you're 30, and you know that you need to get there by the time you're 30, you're probably going to be upset most of the time because you're probably not going to be able to live up to that fact that you set for yourself beforehand. So if we can just turn the page, basically everything that I'm saying now is just how we have a tendency to interpret events with a negative bias. just like our brain will remember more negative things than positive ones, we will fill gaps in our understanding with more negative interpretations. So, this can come out in a lot of ways. We can catastrophize things. We can take something small and make it into a much bigger thing, because that's how our brain fills in the gaps. We can overgeneralize things. If you made a mistake at work, right? I'm sure everyone could think of that, where someone's criticized them for something and you thought right away, I'm a failure, or I'm going to fail school, or I'm going to lose my job, or any of that. So there's all these different things. And negative bias can come about when we confuse what we need, what we want. We make different things personal. So what does that mean? Why am I talking about this? I'm sure you guys are wondering why I'm going on and on about facts and how we interpret it. But this really connects to the checking the facts skill that we're going to learn today. So this is an emotion regulation DBT skill that we're going to use to see if our emotional reaction to an event will actually fit the facts of that event or that situation. So this is really useful when people are in situations, when you guys will be in a situation that you're going to be triggered by your thoughts and your assumptions in response to some sort of prompting situation. So we can all just visualize for a second. There's some situation that happened. So let's say, I'll give a personal example. Actually, this didn't actually happen to me, but it very well could happen to anyone. Prompting situation is you're in your car and someone drives by and scratches your car. So I could be really angry, and that will be my emotional reaction to that. But we need to judge if we're really having an accurate interpretation of what just happened based on a few things, based on the duration of how long we're experiencing that emotion, based on the intensity of that emotion, and based on the actual emotion itself. So if I have severe road rage and it's lasting for 6 months and I'm tracking down who the person is who scratched my car to get them to pay for my car, and I'm so angry and I spend all day punching the wall because I'm so upset, that's obviously not fitting with the situation. So that's a situation where checking the facts would actually show that what I'm feeling in that moment doesn't match with that prompting event. So basically the process of checking the facts will actually help us to uncover and see kind of the chain of escalation that led us into that response. So it's not usually just that there's a prompting event and there's an emotional response. There's really some sort of chain in the middle that led us to have this escalation. And that escalation might lead us to feel really miserable, really a lot of distress, really upset. So we can look at these types of worksheets that I'm going to pass out for our homework, and we're going to kind of review together, and we'll see that our emotional responses don't always fit the facts. If it doesn't fit the facts, the next step is to see what are my core beliefs, what are my assumptions, what do I have in my head that's making me take this prompting event and interpret it in such a drastic way. What is it about my beliefs, my emotions, what I've grown up with that's leading me to have this big reaction? And then we can work from there with other skills and how to fix that. Sometimes it might be hard to fill out these types of worksheets about checking the facts on our emotions, because for us we might feel like a really distressing or really serious thing happened to us, and we might feel like you can't accurately portray that on a paper. It's not getting it down right. The reality is it will help us to understand why we're feeling what we feel and what triggers us as a person for our emotions, and we can see it could be validating for us how to use that next time when you start to feel that type of emotion. So I'm just going to pass out the homework for everyone. So just take one and pass. Okay, so I know that it's a lot of sheets, but you guys will get through it very quickly. As you could see at the top, we have the event that leads to our thoughts, which leads to our emotions. And our emotions can have a big effect on our thoughts about events. So here's how we check the facts. We can ask ourselves these questions. Does someone want to volunteer to read it out loud?
Sure.
Okay.
Number one?
Yeah.
Ask, what is the emotion I want to change? 2, ask, what is the event prompting my emotion? Describe the facts you observed through your senses. Challenge judgments, absolutes, and black and white descriptions. 3, ask, what are my interpretations, thoughts, and assumptions about the event? Think of other possible interpretations. Practice looking at all sides of the situation and all points of view. Test your interpretations and assumptions to see if they fit the facts. 4, ask, am I assuming a threat? Label the threat. Assess the probability that the threatening event will really occur. Think of as many other possible outcomes as you can. 5, what is a catastrophe? Imagine a catastrophe really occurring. Imagine coping well with a catastrophe.
Right, I just want to pause for 1 second. Thank you so much. So
Sure.
actually, that asking what's the catastrophe is kind of like you know, if you really are feeling like what you're feeling is justified, your emotions are justified in that moment, what is so bad? What's the worst thing that will happen in that situation, and how can you cope with that? And that's, you know, we get to later with problem solving and coping ahead and those types of skills. But if we can understand by just factualizing things that are going through and kind of taking the emotional piece out of it, that will really help with understanding that things aren't as catastrophic as they seem. Yeah, you could just read the last one.
Does my emotion and or its intensity fit the actual facts? Check out the facts that fit each emotion. Ask why is mine.
Yeah, so wise mind is another DBT skill that we didn't get through today. So if we just flip to the next page, handout 8A, there's some examples here. So we have on the side fear, anger, disgust, envy, jealousy, love, sadness, shame, and guilt. These are just a few emotions. Obviously, there's a lot. And these are some examples of things that would fit the facts, you know, just as a guideline for you when doing the worksheets. You know, an example, let's say I'll just throw one out about fear, is if there's a threat to your health or the health of someone that you care about. You know, that's a justified situation that you would be able to feel fear, and you could say that that would be justified in its response. So there's examples like that for all of them. And just like we spoke about at the beginning, the intensity and duration of an emotion are justified by how likely it is that that outcome will actually happen, and how great or important the outcomes are, and how effective the emotion is in your life now. So if we just flip to the next page, this is just kind of something that we have for you guys, you know, just to start from the beginning with, you know, what emotion you're experiencing, what is the event prompting your reaction, what are your interpretations, thoughts, and assumptions about this prompting event that happened. So right away, what it pops into your head when something happens to you. Am I assuming a threat? So that's, you know, you have to be honest with yourself and filling these down. Sometimes it's hard because people feel a lot of pride and they don't want to write down all these things that are going on with them, but this is just for you guys to see. I'm not going to be looking at it. Number 5, what's the worst that can happen if I let myself experience the emotion? And what's the worst that can happen if I ignore it? And how does or doesn't the emotion fit the facts of the situation? So that's really what we've been talking about the whole time. And just going over the last 2 sheets, these are just the worksheets, worksheet 5 and worksheet 5, page 2, kind of just really going through what we already just went through about what's the prompting event, describing it, and check the facts, rewrite the facts over here, list other possible interpretations that you think could come out of that situation. And if we head to step 4, it's the same type of thing as that other sheet. Am I assuming a threat? What are other possible outcomes? What's the catastrophe? And how can we cope if the worst does happen? So that's part of, you know, giving coping skills. And then we need to rate it to see if your emotion or its intensity or its duration fits the facts, and describe what you did to check the facts. So it's a little repetitive in here, but I think that each sheet has a little bit of a difference, and it's really helpful to us to kind of train our minds to understand that when we have these strong emotional responses, we can pause and think about all these different things. Think about the prompting event, think about our interpretations of it and our assumptions, and think about what's the worst that can happen, and really check the facts on that in order to kind of regulate how we're feeling in that moment. So thank you guys so much. Thanks for coming to the group today.
Thank you.